Today's guest is Jason Freeny, but many of you know him by his Instagram handle as Gummy Fetus. Jason is a New York-based sculptor and toy designer, also voted 2014 fan favorite by Clutter Magazine's readers. When I think of creatives that I consider to have a gold standard career, I think of Jason. With a strong brand presence, huge following, Jason's known for his anatomical character dissections that everyone worldwide recognizes. His work has been in solo exhibitions in Los Angeles, Tokyo, Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong. And before we start, Jason, where can people connect with you and see your work?
I started on MySpace, which of course I'm no longer there. That's how long I've been doing this. And then I moved over to Facebook. So on Facebook, I'm there. I think you can search Jason Freeny, even though I'm under Gummy Fetus. They make you put your real name in at some point, and it'll still take you there. And then, of course, Facebook changed its algorithm at some point, and everybody, including myself, ran over to Instagram. And Instagram's been pretty much my main page. That's the place I post things first, but I usually run over to Facebook, or it automatically posts it. So Facebook or Instagram, but Instagram right now is the main one.
Fantastic. Listeners, please connect with Jason, and I appreciate if you hit the subscribe and like button for our show. So, Jason, by the way, congratulations on having such an amazing career. When I was researching about you, there's such a rich history in your career that your career should almost be told in chapters. So maybe we should really start at the very beginning. Like, did you know at a young age that you wanted to have a career in the creative field?
Absolutely. My father was a painting and sculpture professor at the University of Maryland. My mother was a costume designer and seamstress. And so art was always part of my life. It came naturally to me, and I enjoyed it.
Did that also translate in school, in middle school, high school? Did you excel in art?
I did, strangely enough, and it's funny that you say that it should be told in chapters, because I kind of agree with that. I started when I was young in theater. My older sister, Tracy, was very much into dance. This is back in the 1970s. She was very into dance and disco, and she was really searching out that kind of career. I think she got onto like Solid Gold as one of the Solid Gold dancers for a week. Yeah. Way back. And so she was in doing dinner theater. And of course, me and my other sister, I'm the youngest in the family. So I have an older sister and a younger sister, but they're both older than me. So we did a lot of dinner theater in the Washington, D.C. area, the Harlequin Dinner Theater, whatever. A lot of people I was working with went on to Broadway and had, some amazing careers in that aspect. But I started off in theater, doing, musicals, Oliver, Gypsy, things like that. And it culminated sometime around middle school. And I did they were having auditions for a Chuck E. Cheese commercial. And of course, all the kids that were in these shows, we all knew each other, and we all would show up on the same auditions and, see each other. And I ended up getting the part in this Chuck E. Cheese commercial where I was, I played this like reporter, and I was going in to Chuck E. Cheese to interview people about how awesome this special deal they had for the holiday season was. And that was pretty much the last thing I did, because, my voice changed. As I got older, I started not enjoying being in your face, like up front, like everybody look at me. And I kind of set back a little and became a little more reclusive as, when puberty kicked in. This is about the time that happened. And I much more enjoyed, how the stages worked and who designed the sets and all the props and everything. And that's the part that I was getting really interested in. So I did this Chuck E. Cheese commercial. If anybody out there on this planet can find it, I will be a happy boy. I've been searching for it I think it was regional in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area. It was probably around 1982, 84, somewhere around there. I don't remember. Anyway, but I started getting into more interested in the art part of it that was not me being an actor. I don't think I was ever any kind of amazing actor. I just, I was kids, and kids actors are all pretty much a dime a dozen. They're all, every once in a while, one or two will shine out, but I certainly wasn't the ones that was shining out. And I just was, through middle school, I was good at art. And it wasn't until high school that I really started I took all the art classes, and I was like a junior or a senior. And my photography teacher, I was taking taught black and white photography, and I had taken all the classes and we ran out of things. And she let me just take a class in her classroom that was me just exploring art. And I got really into silk screening. So I would just, make prints and silk screens, and it was my favorite part of the school. And that portion of my high school was very, very much forming, and me really, finding out, wow, I really enjoy art. I really want to make this. I really want to do this. I got so much joy out of it.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, because when I look at your work on Instagram, you're masterful in sculpting and illustration and many others, right? But I can assume when you graduated high school, you could have studied fine art, graphic design, or any other creative discipline in college. But how did you particularly land in majoring in industrial design?
Well, my family life at the time had kind of fallen apart. My mother and I weren't really getting along, and I kind of left home a little early from before I turned 18. And a family that lived in the same town, I was friends with their son, the Ricketts. They took me in, and they saw that I had, some type of drive and some desire to do art. Their son was very talented as well. He had applied to Pratt in Brooklyn for architecture, and he got a scholarship, and he was going to go to Pratt. So they were like, hey, why don't you come along when we drive up there? And I drove up there with my portfolio of silk screens and whatever drawings I had, and applied to the school and got accepted. And it was really that family. I mean, I had a lot of help, through childhood and through the years from other people. So I can't say that this was all entirely me. The art part was all me, but I never would have been able to figure out how to get into school and how to get into college. But I got into Pratt not knowing what I wanted to do. So when I was growing up, I had always wanted to be a painter. Painters are always kind of the ones that are in the art world. They're the most admired, a painting. And so I wanted to be a painter, but I knew from my father's life, he passed away when I was 14, right about that time I was reaching puberty. I knew from my father's life, he was, like I said, a sculptor and painting professor, and he was also a freelance graphic designer. And, it's a hard life. This is before computers, and everything was cut by hand with X-Acto knives. And
absolutely.
Layered and INTs, and every letter had to be glued down if you were going to write a word out. But I knew that being a painter probably didn't have much of a life to it, So I was always on the lookout for something else. And I remember getting to Pratt undecided, and I wandered into the industrial design building. And as I walked into the main hall, they have, it's all glass cases displaying all the best work from all the students. And these glass cases were all filled with these models of products, coffee makers and all kinds of stuff that they had made out of wood and plastic. But these things looked like they were manufactured. They looked like actual manufactured products, but they were all prototypes. And I'm like, I want to do this. I wanted to be a model maker. I'm like, oh my God, I want to learn how to make all this cool stuff. And that's how I got into industrial design. I didn't care about the design. I wanted to be a model maker. And as college went on, and I never graduated from Pratt. I had problems with art history. It just wasn't my thing. But I excelled in all my design classes and all my, everything else. But to this day, I've never gotten a diploma. But as I found out quickly in the art world, in careers like, you want to be a doctor, school matters. That's the stuff that
Yeah.
matters. When it comes to art, and I'm not trying to tell anybody, screw school, but they don't care about your grade. They don't care what classes you took when you're a designer. All they care about is, can you make us look good? And so it's all about your portfolio. And so I got out and I started, working with studios and stuff, doing sculpting and model building. I've always had a knack with picking up any kind of medium and doing at least decent with it. I'm not going to say that I excelled at everything, but going back to your comment about how I do all these different things, I really did. I did all kinds of different things. And going out into a career in New York City doing art, it was both a good thing and a bad thing. As much as I thought, being this kind of Renaissance guy that I can do everything, people are going to want to grab you and have you work for them. But it turns out they want you to do one thing really good, and that's it for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job in a studio. This is down a couple blocks from the World Trade Center, pre 9/11, doing installations for restaurants and people with a lot of money in their homes. And it was a good fit because every week I was doing something different. I was designing the interior portion of a Planet Hollywood. And then I was doing a sculpture for the release of some album at the Sony store. And it just, whatever projects would come in, I was kind of the guy that did all the loose stuff. They had plenty of painters there, and they were amazing painters. And it really kind of put me in my place to where I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not going to be a painter because I am in no way on the level of these people, but I sculpt really well. And I have great attention to detail, and I'm very versatile with other things. So that's kind of where that all began. If that answers your question.
No, absolutely. Thank you. That's very insightful. And it makes me think, we were talking prior to the show, we're roughly the same age. And I came into the cusp right there where, the internet was there, but it wasn't quite utilized the way it was. So could you paint the picture on how, when you got out of school, did everything that you expected that your career, did it look like what you thought it would be right when you left Pratt?
Not at all. And it never has. I remember, this is a story, in college, I was kind of a student advisor. When the new students would come in, and this was a volunteer thing, I would be a student advisor for the new freshman class. And, it was basically me showing them around the campus and whatever. And it was like before school started, the freshmen would come in and for a week before the actual upperclassmen arrived. And I'd show them around the campus and show them where, this is good Chinese food or whatever. It wasn't anything outside of that, but I enjoyed it because I enjoyed being social. And it's a funny story, and it will lead into this, what, the world was like going out. One of my students that I was showing around, just a year or two younger than me, was Bill Schwab. This guy could draw. This guy could do caricatures. He was really good. And at the time, I was doing a lot of drawings myself of these really creepy, surreal monsters and stuff like that. And we both loved Mad Magazine. And we had this great idea to grab our portfolios and just go in to Manhattan and just knock on the door at Mad Magazine and see if they'll hire us. And of course, there's a Simpsons episode where the Simpsons go to New York City. And Bart is all excited. He's like, I'm going to go to the Mad Magazine headquarters. And he has this vision of what it's like at Mad Magazine. It's just amazing and all this crazy stuff going on. And it's really a woman at a desk. The entire staff is freelance. And so that's pretty much what we ran into, and we showed our portfolios and they're like, listen, if you want to put some content together and present it and see if it's for the magazine, whatever. But no, we don't hire. It's not like that. Bill, of course, went on to he is now the lead character developer at Disney. So just to tell you how good he was. I remember I went to see, God, what movie was it? might have been Wreck-It Ralph. I hadn't seen Bill in years. And the credits are rolling. And then Bill Schwab, whatever. I'm like, wait a minute, is that Bill Schwab? And I went on Facebook and I found him. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, holy crap, you're my hero, Bill. Good for you. But yeah, the world was not what I thought it was. I had a hard time finding work. My first job in this city was I worked at the Strand bookstore in the basement, alphabetizing books all day. And I ran into a friend on the train. And this is a good thing for people coming up. Network. All those friends you have in school, keep connected with them, because every job that I've gotten was because I knew somebody, So, yeah. So that's kind of how that happened. I did this stuff in the studio. And then at some point, I think Planet Holly was kind of my main client when I was working at the studio doing all these interiors. And of course, there was the great Planet Hollywood crash of like 1997. I don't remember. It was about the time that it happened. And that kind of stopped and I lost my job. But I had made some connections through I would do work for MTV and Nickelodeon on occasion through this job. And I had connections there and I contacted them and they brought me in. And that's when I started working at MTV Networks for a while. So that's kind of how that went.
That was my next question. I don't know how much of your fans know, and they probably do, that you had this rich history of like working for, I believe you did some stuff for ESPN as well, right? So MTV, sure. ESPN, and a lot of these yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say first, I was doing, back in the early 90s, I was doing paintings, and there was kind of this pinup resurgence in the early 90s. And I started doing all these paintings, airbrushes, pinups. And I did a show in the city. And then I had some connection. I think Time Out New York was my first one. And I did an cover illustration for them for their Vice issue for that year. So I was working as an illustrator then. And then I got a connection with Penthouse Magazine. And I started doing editorial pinups for Penthouse Magazine. Probably did 7 or 8 issues. It wasn't every issue. They would kind of rotate the illustrators, but doing that for a while. And then worked at ESPN for 97 to about 2002. But I was a permalance. I wasn't, a lot of people that are at MTV or these television places, they're permalance. You're not actually an employee. You are more of a freelancer that happens to work there every day. And it's kind of their little loophole to them not having to pay your health insurance. There's no job security. They can let you go at the drop of a hat. There's no unemployment insurance or anything. But it was hands down my favorite job. I just enjoyed being, the energy of television and cameras, and it's very infectious. But I really enjoyed that job. And around 2002, the birth of my son came along, and I got to a point where I could not stay there because I needed to get health insurance and I needed something more secure. And I don't remember which came first. I think I worked at ESPN for a while because ESPN started up their mobile division. This is when ESPN decided to have their own phone. You get the ESPN phone. This was pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone. It was like a flip phone that you would get that had ESPN logo on it. And you could get your scores and your updates and all this other stuff. That lasted about a year, and the ESPN mobile thing kind of crashed. The ESPN mobile app that you can get for your iPhone is the remnant of that phone. It just became that app at some point. So I was there for maybe a year, and then I was working in Storrs, Connecticut, because that's where their headquarters was. I'd drive to Connecticut for the week, and I'd stay in a hotel working, and then I'd come home on the weekend. And I was just like begging them. I'm like, listen, you got to move, because they have headquarters in Manhattan. It's just they do all the creative stuff in Connecticut. So they moved me down eventually to Manhattan, where I was just kind of doing I was doing the graphics for the mobile app, little teeny tiny little pixelated images and things like that. I did some stuff for like some of their commercials they did, just some, when they flip open a phone and the phone is like, operating on their hand, it's a simulated image. So I would do like motion graphics where I would make it look like when the guy hits the phone, it does what it's supposed to do immediately, things like that. So that kind of went under. And then I got hired. There was an ad in the paper for a toy design and in New Jersey. And I'm like, I have absolutely no toy experience whatsoever, but this sounds fun. So I went for this interview. There was a place called the Ob, just over the river, just over the George Washington Bridge in New Jersey. And that's where I met Steve Casino. I was actually coming in and he was on his way out. So Steve knows his toys. I mean, I don't know anybody that he's like an encyclopedia on the history of toys. But this job was, you have the big toy companies like Hasbro and Mattel and all this other stuff. And they do some in-house designs where they come up with their own toys. But a lot of the toys that you see on the shelves, and I haven't listened to Steve's podcast. He may have explained this, but there are people that are just inventors that sit at home, that come up with concepts and ideas for toys, and then they present them to the toy company. And for a royalty, the company will buy it. So a lot of the toys you see on the shelves are come up with actual inventors outside of these toy companies.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and it's kind of smart. It saves these companies a lot of research and development. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of how it works. So I did that for a year, and I never sold a toy. But I had a blast there. I mean, everything I came up with ended up turning into a toy art. And that's around the time. This is 2000 somewhere around 2001, 2002. I had discovered designer toys. This was kind of like when it was just getting started. And there were this toy called a Key, Qee. And a lot of people know Bearbricks these days. But the Key was a predecessor of the Bearbrick. And it was Bearbrick actually copied or tried to copy their particular bear to what you know now as a Bearbrick. And Keys kind of like disappeared, and now Bearbricks is kind of the king of that particular little genre. And I went through a couple other jobs after that, just kind of doing some web design and things like that. It was very difficult time to find work. This was around 2007 that everything kind of crashed. And I had started doing some illustrations with lots of robots and things like this. And then I gave one of these robots a balloon dog as a pet. And I was doing some illustrations on the computer. I was doing everything in Maya, 3D modeled. And I was like treating this dog as a dog. And I'm like, wow, if this thing was real, it would have a really fucked up, pardon my language, anatomy on the inside. We're all shaped the way we are because of our muscles and our bones, And I'm like, these bones and these muscles are going to be really wacky. So I decided to do an illustration of the anatomy of a balloon dog, and I put it together like it was, you'd see in a doctor's office if you were to go to the vet.
Yeah.
This is what your balloon dog looks like on the inside. And that's kind of where it all started. I did the illustration. This was back, like I said, during MySpace time. I put it up on my page in MySpace and got a lot of traction on it. And then it was High Fructose Magazine contacted me. They're like, oh, this is really awesome. Can we put it in our next issue? I'm like, hell yeah.
Let me jump in there.
Sure.
Jason. And thank you. You're giving me the chronological order of your career, and it's really insightful. And we'll get back to Steve because I want to ask a question about Steve Casino in particular. But I'm hearing your story. You're an artist for hire. You're going different places. You got into a toy company. It's a little more stable. You're part of the staff. And you create this anatomical dog picture, and I've seen it. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is every artist's wild dream, is that whatever they create instantaneously there's a lot of engagement, viral, so to speak. Did you expect that?
I did not. And this is back before viral was viral. This was MySpace. This is, I just thought it would be cool. I did the illustration. I'm like, this is freaking great. I love it. I like to make things that I would like. And it certainly fit in that. And I just put it out there. I didn't expect it to start a whole new career for me. Absolutely not. Had no idea.
But in MySpace, when you posted it, like, how do you know? I mean, obviously the likes and shares and all that stuff. And I haven't been in MySpace in a long time, but
I don't know. I don't even know if it was likes or whatever. I have no idea, but there was some method where I could tell that a lot of people were liking it.
But High Fructose Magazine contacted you because of that you said you did it in Maya or
I did it in Maya. It was 3D modeled and rendered in Maya, and then I composited it in Photoshop, and I did all the text layout in Illustrator.
So then High Fructose Magazine just contacted you, and that was the first time,
they contacted me and they put it in their magazine. They made it into a big giant like fold out poster. It was like 4 feet by 4 feet that you could like unfold. And that was it. And I was like, okay. And of course, all these ideas started flying into my head. Like, what other things that we don't see as alive would have cool anatomy? And I think the next one that I did was a gummy bear. I'm like, okay. So I started thinking of like things that I could dissect and figure out what their anatomy was. And I would follow the same formula, which is the outside looks its way because the inside is making it look that way. So I would do a reverse engineering of it. You know, the skull is making that snout stick out. So I have to sculpt a snout that would fit inside that, things like that. And that's where it took off.
When High Fructose, which is a highly visible publication, when they published your story, did you strategically start thinking, how do I leverage this?
My entire life, I just make it up as I go. And I never really thought, how do I leverage this? How do I turn this into a career? I'm like, that was fun. Let's do another one. And I started doing them, and they would just get big feedback. I got contacted by, it was a guy named Tommy Kane, and I didn't know who Tommy Kane was. And he's like, yeah, I saw, this is an email because, around that time, he's like, I'm Tommy Kane, and I would love to, do you have a print of this? And I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of making a print of it. And Tommy, at the time, he was doing ads. He was an art director, and he was doing ads for, and pardon me, Tommy, if I'm wrong, if you're a creative director or whatever. We're still friends to this day. He was known for the ads. There was a Steve Madden shoes, and he was doing these ads where it was these really quirky girls walking down the street with big heads, and they were all like choppy, fantastic things. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy wants a piece of my thing. So I remember I ran down to the only place that I knew that did printing at the time was Dugal, and it's down on, I think, 23rd Street. And I had them spit out a print that I could sell to Tommy. And, this is like, Dugal is like where all the really high, all the big names go there to do their stuff. So their prices are out freaking outrageous, but they do great work. So I paid so much money to have that print made. I just wanted to make the print to get it to Tommy, but that's where that started. I do my own printing now. It's just way more financially doable. Yeah, I mean, I would get, over years, I would get, we're doing a book, we use it in this book. It started coming in just like that.
Yeah, it sounds like a remarkable thing that's just happening here, where it's just picking up steam, and where did you say to yourself, maybe I should quit focusing on trying to find a job and maybe pour my energy onto this newfound popularity and make this my full-time endeavor?
Well, at the time, I didn't have a choice. I had lost my job. This was 2007-ish. Everything had crashed. Nobody was hiring. And my unemployment ran out. I mean, I was physically looking for work. And it's like, well, what do I do with all this time between looking for work? And I would just make these illustrations. So I didn't have a choice. It was, you as an artist, as a creative, anybody that's a creative person that, is really passionate about it, you create, it doesn't matter. I mean, if I didn't get all the notoriety that I was getting, I would still do it. It just, this is what you like to do. So I was just doing it, and it was just catching traction. And it got to a point, where was that? I had done this for, I can't remember the years. I had done it for several years, these illustrations. And then I decided, why don't I do a sculpture? And I had a toy, and I noticed that vinyl toys, when you cut into them, are hollow. And I'm like, this is perfect. So one day I took a dunny, which is the character that Kid Robot has as their kind of like base character. And I cut into it, little 2.5-inch toy. And I grabbed some Sculpey, and I just sculpted the anatomy just like I did in the illustrations. And I threw it up on eBay. And at this time I had somewhat of a following. And I'm like, I needed money. And I'm like, it will be, if I make $5, it's $5 more than I had yesterday. It's, it's a good thing. I remember that thing, I was just blown away. I think it sold for like $500. I'm like, holy crap. So I immediately turn around and I grab another toy, which was an ice bat, which ugly doll. And another little 3-inch vinyl toy. And I did that one, and I threw that one up. I think that one sold for over $1,000. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that, at least for now, I can do to make money. And so I just started doing it. I didn't have a choice. It was the only thing that was bringing money in.
From that story, by the way, whoever has that first eBay purchase, man, I would love to own that.
I'm curious too. I could go back at my emails at some point, and of course I'll have a receipt. But yeah, sure.
From there's a Singapore-based company called Mighty Jaxx that wanted to team up with you, where the relationship itself yielded over 200 toy designs together. Was there a lot of time from there from like your eBay sales? Did it just start catching on fire, and where you're being contacted by a company like Mighty Jaxx?
Well, I always wanted to do toys. So toys were the whole designer toy thing. I'm like, yeah, this is, I would love to have these things manufactured. So the first thing I did was, and again, I don't remember where this fits into the timeline. It was sometime around when I did the balloon dog illustration. I would, I had a son. I would go into toy stores. And there was all of these, there was this section, the science section, where they would have the anatomy of a frog and then the anatomy of a T-Rex. And so I picked the box up and I looked on the back of the box, and it was all done by this one company in Hong Kong. So I contacted this company in Hong Kong, and I'm like, here, check this out. Have you ever thought about doing this? It will, I promise you, it's going to be a seller. People will love this stuff. We went back and forth for a while, and I'm not going to name the company because we do not work with each other anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But so they picked up the balloon dog and the gummy bear and a couple other things, and still hands down the worst contract I've ever signed. It was the first toy thing that I did, and of course the economy was really shitty at the time, and it took them like 4 years, but eventually that balloon dog toy came out. And I've always loved doing this, anatomy in a clear shell, like the old Visible Man when we were, younger. That's kind of where that whole vision wanted to be. I got an email from Jackson Paw, who had just started up Mighty Jaxx. Mighty Jaxx was like, I think only around for about a year. And it was a very small company. And he's like, hey, he wanted to see if me and another artist wanted to team up. I'm not going to name the other artist. It's not relevant. To team up and do a collaboration that they would turn into a toy. And I'm like a toy person. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. So I contacted this other artist, and they were like, they were just into their thing. They were a painter. And just the toys, I guess, wasn't their thing. They just wanted to do their painting. And I kept pushing it. And at some point, I went back to Jackson. I'm like, Jackson, listen, I don't think this guy really is that into it, but I'm certainly into it. Let's make some toys. And so he's like, okay. So we made, I think the first thing they produced was very simple, was the skull bomb that I had sculpted. And that basically started this relationship. And so we started doing toys together. They invited me to Singapore, and I was like, I've always wanted to travel to Asia. And they flew me out for their comic convention there to sign these skull bombs that we had done. And while I was there, Jackson kind of took me in the back and he's like, check this out. And they had taken the concept of what I had done with the anatomy and they had prototyped it into a Batman figure.
Whoa.
And yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, it was exactly what I've been wanting to do. It was basically the Visible Man from the 60s, except now we were doing it with a licensed character. And they had gotten the license to do it. And they released that, and it's still one of my favorite toys. And that's kind of where it all started. At some point, we just kind of contracted together to let's just, because I was doing projects with Kid Robot. I was doing projects with Toy 2R. I was doing, here and there. And it was kind of like all over the place. But then Jackson offered me, it's like, hey, listen, let's just team up and let's just make toys. And we've been doing it ever since. So that's where that all comes from. They get the licenses, yeah, and I do art direction, and it's fantastic.
And one of the questions I have here in front of me is like, how does somebody navigate like this situation where you're working with a huge company? Like, there's no blueprint on how that's done, but from what I'm listening to, there's a lot of just you being fearless. You're just reaching out. You're having conversations, and you're letting just let the winds of destiny take you where you're supposed to be. But
that's exactly it. I mean, like I said, I look back and I'm just like, I would go. I mean, I've been in a constant search my life, just to be creative and work. I never, ever, even while I was doing industrial design, because toy design is industrial design, I never even thought that while I was doing that toy design or doing the industrial design that I would end up doing toys. It never occurred to me. So, but it's just how it happened.
Can you dive into a little bit about your fans globally, especially the ones in Asia?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look deeply into this, but they look like they appreciate you immensely with the work that you're creating. How is that relationship, and how do you feel when you go out there to these places overseas?
I love it. I appreciate them. That's the thing. You got to be humble about this stuff. Every day I wake up, this could end today. This could just dry up and end today. And at some point it may dry up, So yeah, I would say that I'm more, if I use the word popular, I'm more popular in Asia than I would say in the United States. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think, first off, Mighty Jaxx is based in Asia. Their viewpoint is very different than the American viewpoint when it comes to these things. The thing that blew me away is the malls in Asia. So the malls in Asia are very different than the malls in the United States. The malls in Asia are really cultural gathering places where the malls will they will do art shows. They will, they'll do a rotation for a month. They'll do, this artist and they'll construct giant, monolithic versions of these people's, designs in every mall. I mean, it's mind blowing. It's, the United States, a mall, you go to buy a t-shirt and maybe some incense and, a booby cup at the Spencer's. But in Asia, it's just it's mind blowing. The food courts in these malls are some of the best food you'll ever have. You go to a mall in the United States and, you'll get, Wendy's, whatever, but there it's just up to a whole different level. So the way that they look at this, pop culture is very different. It's very elevated. It's very part of, they rotate these shows out. So it gives you a reason to go to the mall next month because it's going to be a whole new thing. And it's just a genius idea. A lot of these things end up being like Instagram photo opportunities, but that's the genius part of it. People take photos of these things, these giant, versions of these toys. I had a couple of them in, did Hong Kong and Shanghai and Beijing, where I had, there's a Jason Freeny show in the middle of the mall, and they just had all these giant versions constructed of designs that I've done, and people are taking pictures and they tag it, and it just spreads virally, and it's just genius. The people that go there enjoy it. The malls enjoy it because it gets free advertising. I don't know if it's free. I mean, they paid to have all this stuff created, but it's just a very different viewpoint there. The culture is different than the United States. And I think the other reason is just like we have a fascination with, manga, anime, and Japanese, Asian characters and art because it's exotic. It's different. We don't think that way. That artwork comes from that part of the world because the culture creates it. Just like we create our own culture. We have the hip hop. We have the street, the graffiti. That's what we create. To them, Western artists are exotic. And that's why they really appreciate it. Just like we really love Asian art, That's why I think the reason is.
That's a great insight. And I know there's a time restraint, so I want to be really respectful of your time. So
Sure.
I'm going to shoot you here just a couple more questions here.
Sure.
This is the part where I love to you have a wealth of knowledge, wildly successful. If some young artist were to come to you and ask, how do I even follow in your footsteps or at least have a career that I'm going to be very proud of? What kind of advice can you give that person?
Well, I'm older, and the path that I took, I just don't know if it could be recreated. So at the time, social media was young and it just really blew up. And when Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff was first created, it wasn't as restricted, Like today, I talk about how Facebook changed its algorithm and Instagram changed its algorithm. I used to get 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 likes on a piece that I would put up because at the time, the way that it was set up, if you signed up to see my page, you actually got to see my stuff. Mm-hmm. At some point, money came into it, and I don't blame, it's a company. They want to make money. So they're trying to figure out how to do that. But they throttled that. They channeled it onto a really narrow little line. And now I'll get 100, 500 on a good day. If I get over 2,000 likes on something, I'm like, whoa. But that was just like an average post, 10 years ago. So my path would be, and this is what I would say, create good stuff. Understand that a lot of young designers want to be them. They want to put themselves out there. I created this character. This character represents me, and I want everyone to love it. And sometimes that happens. But then again, people want to be able to relate to whatever your work is, The fact that when I started doing this stuff, I would dissect popular characters. I was riding the coattails of those characters. So if I was just dissecting Dave, some character I came up with, it probably would not have gotten the feedback. So I understand that. Today, now I'm more into my own stuff. I kind of, outside of just making the toys and an occasional sculpt, I'm creating my own designs now. But it was that setup that made it possible for me to be able to have the time to do that now. The money that comes in from that helps pay my bills and gives me the freedom to be able to make that stuff. So for a young designer or somebody just starting out or trying to get into the field, I would still tell them to make great stuff and just put it out there. Because even though the algorithms have changed, if it's really good, people will come to you. And that's all I can say about that. That's if you want to take that path. There are some people that are just really good promotional people. I couldn't sell a used car for the life of me. But some people can convince you to buy the dumbest shit. So, but my path was just like make things that people can relate to, and it will come to you. Just be true to yourself. That's all.
Jason, this question is my favorite question I ask because it forces the guest to reflect on their career, which a lot of us are always forward thinking. And the question is, has your career been everything you thought it would be? And what has surprised you about it?
It's absolutely, I had no idea I would end up here. Every single part of it is surprising. It's still, I went to Asia for a show in Shanghai, and we're driving down the road to this mall that it's in. And they had put up a 6-story image of one of my pieces and Jason Freeny running up the side of the building. I was like, who is this? Where the hell am I? What is going on here? So yeah, no, every single thing is a total surprise. I don't know how to answer that because none of it is expected. I have no idea what's coming down the line. So just keep making stuff.
Not to sound corny, but do you ever like pinch yourself? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see it's the image that's on my banner image. I'm still like, what the hell? How did this happen? You know? Yeah. And then I come home and I clean the cat pan just like everybody else. You know, I sit by myself and watch stupid TV. It's just okay, you know.
All right, here 2 more questions. And I want to go back to Steve Casino.
Sure.
And you mentioned your other friend, was it Bill Schwab?
Bill Schwab, yes.
I mean, do you ever sit back and say, you look at your people that you know and you're like, wow, how do we both successfully get here? Like, I look at my friends that have done things and it comes from a place because I've done some stuff that's pretty cool too. So it's more of this me being really proud of where we all came from and what we're doing. Were you surprised that Steve in his own right had his own like successes that's out there and it went viral? He's been on shows.
Absolutely. I was doing what I was doing. And you know, Steve, we talk to each other on occasion. We don't live near each other. So it's always like, you know, a text or an email. And I remember he was asking me, hey, Jay, you know, how's that going? How's that going? I'm really proud of you. That's really awesome. And I'm like, yeah, he's like, you know, he asked me a couple things. And then next thing I know, he had just, I don't know how he came to this conclusion, but he had picked up this peanut character thing and was running with it. I'm like, okay. And he's gotten a ton of traction out of it. It's very whimsical. It's very unique. Yeah, he set his mind on it and did it. I'm very proud of Steve. He's a great guy.
That's amazing. Lastly, you may have answered this somewhere, and I know your fans know this, but I don't. But how did you land on Gummy Fetus, like as your handle?
Gummy Fetus was, when I had done the gummy bear anatomy, then I started, you know, it wasn't just anatomy. I started treating, you know, when a gummy bear gets pregnant, you know, how does that work? You know? And I think I did an illustration. It's called the Immaculate Confection. And it shows how a gummy bear develops in utero. And it starts off as a gumdrop, a little tiny gumdrop, and slowly forms into a little baby bear with an umbilical cord coming out. And, you know, this was early in the internet, and everybody was grabbing all the good avatar names and handles. And I figured, I originally was using moist, the word moist, mostly because everybody, it doesn't matter if you like that word or you hate that word, everybody remembers it. But it didn't quite fit what I was doing. And at some point, I looked at that gummy fetus that I had created. I'm like, oh, that's a great name. So I kind of just, everything else was taken. So I used gummy fetus.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you for sharing your creative journey with us. I'm sure we just touched on you have such a rich history. It's impossible to capture all of it here with these questions, but I want to thank you for inspiring all of us that watch your page. And if there's anything here in the end you want to promote or want to let us all know that what's next or anything else.
Yeah, I have a show. I was planning on doing a show in Tokyo. This was right before COVID hit, and I had done a show in Tokyo before. I contacted the gallery. Let's do another one. It was very successful. And then, you know, like I said, COVID hit. And for years, you couldn't even get into Japan. And they're like, well, why don't you just send us your stuff and we'll do the show? And I'm like, the only reason I'm doing this show is because I want to go to Tokyo. So once that went out the window, I'm like, okay, so I have, usually, you know, you'll do a year and a half of work and then you'll put that in the show. This is like 4 or 5 years of work that I've been doing because I haven't been able to show it. So this is going to be a pretty big show as far as like pieces. I'm probably going to have 40 or 50 pieces in this show when I'm done. That, So I look for a gallery here in the United States, and it's at the Copro Gallery in LA, fantastic gallery. And it'll be the first weekend of December. So it's a bit of a ways away, but that's what I'll be doing. So if you can make it to that show, fantastic. I should be there.
Amazing, Jason. And listeners, please, if you have the opportunity, check those out. And I'm sure you'll document that stuff on Instagram where everybody's watching. So Jason, thank you again. Until next time, everyone, take care and bye.
Yes. And thank you very much, Chris, for having me.